Day snuck up on me, unfortunately. And to show you how out of tune it was, my wife said, if you can make it, our grandkids have got a program on Tuesday, which is in Columbus. So my son lives there, and then I've got, how many grandkids I got? I got 4. And so they were in a school play. So I'm like, I said, is this really going to be important? Because it's like 7 hours up there. Right? You know, and to me personally, I've not seen any school plays, but, you know, I wasn't going to win that one for the grandkids. And they were all, she said, well, they're excited to see you. And I'm like, shoot, that's a long drive. And I knew I'd have to turn around and do it again this morning. So I got up there, I'm sitting there, and I'm like, well, where's Jonathan? And she said, well, he's down there. And I said, what's he doing down there? My wife said, well, your son's a veteran. I went, oh, it's a Veterans Day thing. So the kids were, the whole school was doing a veterans thing. So I tell you what, when you feel old, I do not feel like I'm old enough to have a son who did 4 years in the military. I tell you what was odd about that. When I left for Africa, the same time I left, Jonathan, he was just barely 18, he was in boot camp not even 6 months, and they had him in Afghanistan like immediately. So for quite some time, there wasn't one Barnhouse on this hemisphere, you know, which was a little odd. But anyway, enjoyed preaching out there. I know Kevin's preaching there this evening. I really enjoy. Couldn't ask for a better group to do that with. Kyle kicked it off, and Jim was last night, and Kevin's tonight. And just thankful that we're living in a town where you can do that. You know, we're all on the same team, amen. You know, and Scott County's really blessed to have that, you know, where there are, you know, multiple churches preaching the gospel. And like I said before, what that ought to do for this area, it ought to be a training ground for the world, right? I mean, this is where you should be pumping out the workers for the future churches and missions, because of the heritage that you have in the Bible Belt, that so many obstacles that you don't have here that you have in other places, right? So there are still churches that if you were looking for a King James Baptist, a church that used a King James Bible, there are many people that have to drive over an hour because of that, if that's important to you, right? And here you wouldn't have to drive very far at all, you know, so. And enjoyed preaching with those guys. We have any prayer requests for this evening? Unspoken, okay. You probably don't know him. Oh, good grief! Now his name's gonna pass me, and I had it right here on a. What is his name? Thank you. It was right there. Anyway, Wendell Dobbs had a coworker that I got to know quite a bit, because when I moved here, Mark, before I knew about this church, Mark actually bought a piece of property off of Mark's sister. That's where I live. His name will come to me. Maybe I want to say Dusty, but maybe that's not it. Anyway, and then Mark got so I bought a piece of property, and then I had to start traveling, and we poured the slab, and then I had to go out again and preach. And I came back, and the cabin was all framed in, and Mark got a bunch of his friends together, and I think Jason Terry was a part of that before I even knew who Jason was, and I know Beth's husband was a part of that, and this guy, I can't imagine. Lost his name that easy. But anyway, one of the guys that helped on my house, who I got to know quite a bit through Window, had lung cancer and passed away this morning. And really nice guy, struggled with that bad. He had bad lung cancer. So be praying for that family. Anybody else over here? Yeah, Sheila. Okay. How many unspoken requests do we have tonight? All right. Okay. Anybody else over here tonight? How's Frida doing? Okay. Okay. All right. And then Henry Bennett, and Becky's not here. Anybody heard an update from Henry Bennett? Becky called me and said that he'd gone to the doctor because he had some pain in his chest, and they went and did some tests and found out that there's a really strong possibility he has breast cancer. So they went and checked it immediately. It showed up on the mammogram. So pray for him. You know, the thing of it is, they don't make, Henry at his age and what he's willing, I really pray the Lord gives me a chance to get over to Ukraine with him. You know, every time he does that, every time I see him post from there, I know he's in his 70s, and he's he's neck deep in it every time he goes over there. And I thought, man, I tell you what, hard to replace him. So pray for him tonight. All right, anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Remind me afterwards. I'll see what we can do about that. All right. That's the second time that was mentioned to me, and maybe we can help with that. All right. Anybody else? All right. We'll go ahead and pray. Father, thank you for this evening, and thank you for Wednesday night. Thank you for the revivals that are going around town, and I just pray it would be with Kevin as he preaches tonight. And thank you for the area that we live in and the other churches around us and the partnership that we have and being able to serve the Lord together. And Lord, indeed, Scott County is blessed for that. And I pray that you would use the heart of the next generation in this county to be the ones that feel the burden to spread the word not only here but around the globe. And then, Lord, I just thank you for being able to pray this evening and know that you hear and care. And Father, all across the country this evening, there will be churches having Wednesday night. And I pray you'd be with each one of those services. Lord, I just ask grace and mercy on our country. Lord, that we thank you for the time that it is to be an American, and there's an obvious awakening that seems to be happening, and I pray that would continue to grow. And then, Lord, at the time that we have, I pray that we would take advantage of it, and we use this to get closer to you. And then, Lord, tonight as we come, Lord, that oftentimes one of the most powerful things we have is just being able to talk to you. So first off, we want to tell you how much we appreciate what you did on the cross. And Lord, I also want to come to you tonight knowing that you're a holy God as we bow our head and ask forgiveness of our sins, of the things we know that we have in our heart that get in the way of our relationship with you. And Lord, that when we do ask for forgiveness, we would be reminded of the word repentance. That would not just simply be a form and fashion that we do, but Lord, some heart searching and Lord, an obvious change because of that repentance, just not something we repeat lightly. And then, Lord, I pray that you would be with Wendell's friend who passed away today. And Lord, I know he's a good man and struggled with that for a long time and wasn't on hospice long. And I pray, Lord, that during his funeral that you would be glorified. I know he was a believer, had a chance to talk to him myself. And Lord, I thank you, Lord, that I know that he knew the Lord. And then, Lord, I pray for Henry Bennett this evening. Lord, just had some health scare not too long ago, and now this possible cancer. Lord, but I know that he knows you. And I know that his only prayer would be, Lord, that he could live another day to be able to get back to the places you've placed on his heart, like Cuba and Ukraine. Lord, even in the middle of danger, he didn't back down from that. And Lord, I know there have been countless people that have been brought to you during this war in Ukraine because people like Henry went over and were a witness in a hard time. Lord, I know Eugene's son is still over there and still dealing with that. And I just pray that you would work in the hearts of those people. And Lord, I know that Henry's life's in your hands. We're asking, Lord, that you would heal him, that you would use this to be able to talk to the people around him, and it would be another story of your grace in their lives. Lord, tonight I pray, Lord, and ask your help in our unspoken prayer requests, the things that we have in our heart that's hard to share with other people, or their burdens that we carry. And Lord, just ask that you would work in each one of them. And then, Lord, that you would answer them according to your will. And, Lord, that you would give peace, Lord, as we patiently wait that. Lord, I just pray for the Wednesday night service next door, that you would be with the young people over there. Lord, that as they hear the word tonight, that you would just hide that in their heart. And Lord, I just thank you for loving us. I pray you be with the word as we look into it this evening. We ask this in your precious name. Amen. Let me just get this. All right, do I have this thing on? Okay. In Ezra chapter 9, we're going to look a little bit at verse 8, and then we're going to drop down towards the end of verse 8 and then try and tackle Ezra chapter 9 this evening. And here you have Israel is in captivity. They have their temple's been destroyed. Their land is wasted, and they are under occupation. And then by the hand of God, God allowed them to go back. Now, when you read in the Bible about God restoring Israel, this is not what he's talking about. I mean, this is part of it, but this fell apart again, right? They were never self-governing up until after World War II. Here, as they're building this, they're still in occupation. They still have to ask permission, and that's going to continue. That's where you find them when Jesus is born. They're in occupation. They've got their own government, so to speak. I guess you kind of would look at it kind of the way the Palestinians are now. You know, they were there, but there was another entity over top of them. You know, now when God said he was going to restore them, you know, I honestly believe he's going to restore them to what you see now currently in Israel. And by the way, you know, and I know I mentioned this, but it just boggles my mind how easy people can lose sight of the history of this. When you look at Israel and you say, you know, we believe that God, you know, why we stand for Israel, it's not looking at a people and saying those are good people. It's got nothing to do with their behavior. In fact, it really has nothing to do with them, with the people themselves. It all has to do with God and his promise. That he said that's what he's going to do, and that's what he's going to do. And there's no way in the world you can look through history. Remember, when Jesus was born, they were under occupation of the Roman government. Ever since they went into captivity. That's the way it's been until after World War II. And when you read in the Old Testament the amount of suffering that God said they were going to do, just do a survey. Go through in the Old Testament, start writing down any time God said this is what they were going to do to them, and watch what he said would happen. It's horrific. Right? I mean, just try to draw a mind picture of what, and then if I had to picture anything that matched what God said would happen, would be the Holocaust. Because that was horrific. 100% horrific. Right? The things that took place. Well, when you read, hey, this is what's going to happen to them. They're even going to eat their own kids and cook over their own dung, and all of these things was horrific things were going to happen to the people of Israel. Why? Because they walked away from God. But then, listen, if it stopped there, you and I would have no hope. But he said, regardless of that, he's going to give grace. Remember, what we've done to God as sinners is horrific. Yet he still extended grace to us. And after you get saved, are you still a sinner? Yes. Do you actively sin since you've asked Christ to save you? Yes. Man, if God doesn't have a promise to restore Israel, how in the world is he going to restore us, right? And then all of a sudden, for the first time since back in David's day, they are now their own government. Self-governing people. That's never happened, right? Now, sure, you can look over there and say they don't accept the Messiah, 100%. But I will tell you this right now. If you think they're a threat, you better have your eye on the Muslims more than anything. 100%. I mean, their hatred towards Christianity and the Jews is as old as the story I just told you. They're never, if you are a diehard Muslim, you will not like Christianity. And it goes all the way back to Ishmael and Isaac. That's a long grudge, and it ain't changing, right? Their goal is to overtake. Now you think, how many people in New York City, Dana, what was it, like 9, 10 million people? I mean, a lot of people. A lot of people in New York City. And they just, I mean, there are countries, well, they almost have more people in New York City than Zambia has as a country. Namibia, 1 million people. Greenland, the one that Trump wants to buy, like 63,000. 63,000 people. New York City, the mayor in New York City is more powerful than most of your foreign countries by revenue and by people. Now, for us, we look around it, and as a whole, we know that we have a president, and he's just a mayor. But he's a little bit more than that, because it's not just a city. It's a pretty big city, right? It's as big as some countries. And they just elected a Muslim, outspoken, who did his victory speech in Arabic, right? You know? So, I mean, but I just want you to think about that as we look at this, because this is a little piece of Israeli history. This is not what it's talking about when God gave their land back to them, because they're still under occupation, okay? We're going to pick it up. So they were allowed by God's grace to go back to their land, even though they were not self-governing. And in verse 8, these are now the children, the chief of their fathers, and this is the genealogy of them that went up with me from Babylon in the reign of Alexander the king. So they had to ask permission. They couldn't do it on their own. And I'm not going to read all of these because there's a lot of names I can't say. But it's just a genealogy of everybody that left Babylon under permission. They had to get permission to do it, to be able to go back and rebuild where they came from. They were not self-governing. They were still under occupation, okay? And remain so until just recently. So then I want you to go down to verse 24. Then I separated the 12 of the chief of the priests, Sheriba, Habashai, and 10 of their brethren with them, and weighed unto them the silver and the gold and the vessels, even the offering of the house of our God, which the king and his counselors and his lords and all Israel their present had offered. And I even weighed unto their hand 650 talents of silver, and vessels 100 talents, and of gold 100 talents. Also 20 basins of gold of 1,000 drams, and 2 vessels of fine copper. And I said unto them, ye are holy unto the Lord, the vessels are holy also. So they took this offering together, and even the king gave some offering, and they were able to go back and start rebuilding. Now remember, they did rebuild it, and it's the very same place that Jesus stood, right? But they're still under Roman occupation. And what they built eventually fell again for the same reason it fell the first time. All right? So then let's go down to chapter 9, and we'll try to get through this as fast as we can. Now, when these things were done, the princes came to me, saying, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands, doing according to their abominations, even the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. These names are really familiar. You can go all the way back to Abraham and see these very same names. And every time you see these names, what do you see? They cause problems around them because Israel allowed them to come into their life. Many of the things they got in trouble for was not getting rid of them or being friendly to them when they shouldn't. It's the same thing that God warned them about. It was what Solomon got in trouble for when he began to marry women from these places. And God told them no. Same reason why he told to kill everybody in Jericho. And why did Saul get in trouble for Agag? Remember? what God told him to do? Go in there and kill Agag and kill everybody that was there. And what did he get in trouble for doing? Not doing that. Why? Because of separation. God knows that if Christians do not separate themselves from the world will come in. That's not changed. Even today, that's the problem with Christianity today. We have mingled ourselves with the world. And because of that, it has weakened what we believe. Too much influence from the world. Too many people, cutting corners. I can't tell you how many times you sit down with somebody and they get married and they might, we forget that if you take somebody who strongly believes in speaking in tongues and you don't believe in speaking in tongues, but, in quotes, you're Christians, that's going to cause an issue at some point or the other if you actually are dogmatic about what you believe. Now, if you don't care, well, it's not such a big of a deal. But if you care, it's a big deal. Because you have one that would question whether or not that's for today, and the other one believes that it is. And what's that going to do? It's going to cause friction, right? And that'll happen all over the place. It'll happen on things like this. You get married and you have one opinion of how to raise a child, and the other one has another opinion how to raise a child. Yeah, but you got, googly eyes, so you get married, and later on down you get down the road and you realize, whoa, wait a minute. We're on two different planets here. You've got one idea and I've got another idea. And then that gets rocky. It doesn't work out really well. Well, that theme is that way through the whole Bible. If you've got one person who really thinks it's important to raise the kids in church and they don't want to miss, and the other one, is not so ingrained in that, you're going to have issues with that. So immediately they began to bring in people from other lands, and it was creating problems. And here's why this was really offensive. That's what they got in trouble for in the first place. So now they're back at it again. And in verse 2, for they have taken of their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of the lands. Yea, the hand of the princes and the rulers have been chief in this trespasses. They were told not to do this because when whether somebody is Indian or they're Japanese or they're Chinese, it doesn't matter, or even in Caucasian races, when you have somebody that is diehard, let's say, you're dating a Catholic and you're going to get married to a Catholic, and you say, well, look, they believe in God and they believe in Jesus, so, and you're going to try and go ahead and get married. That is going to be a real problem. Because, a Catholic believes that if a child is not baptized into the Catholic Church, they go to hell. Now, you don't believe that, but a diehard Catholic's going to believe that. I can promise you, I've had them come to me and say that. I've had a grandmother, I was preaching at Slippery Rock, there's a big campground by us, and I would go there on Sunday morning before our church service, and I would preach their church service. It was definitely more of an ecumenical type thing. It was every flavor known to man, right? I got up there, and they would have this doily hanging over the platform with two candles up there that were lit, and I thought, I can't preach behind that. I'll burn this place down, right? And at the beginning of every service, they would say the Lord's Prayer. I'm like, well, this definitely ain't Baptist, right? So we'd go through that, and then I would just preach. I honestly didn't think they'd invite me back. I figured that was a one and done, and I'd be out of there, but they did. And then at first I was in rotation with a lady who was a lady pastor of another church. We were in rotation, and eventually I just ended up doing the whole thing. But one day one of the ladies came to me that go to church there, and she said, will you pray for my grandkids? And I said, sure. What's going to start crying? And she said, my daughter's raising them in a Baptist church. And she said, I want them to be baptized in a Catholic church, but she won't let them. And she looked at me and she said, I'm afraid my children are going to go, my grandkids are going to go to hell. I don't mean it. That don't mean anything to me because I don't believe that. But a Catholic believes that. 100%. You know, you can say, well, I know a Catholic. Yeah, well, I'm sure you can find every flavor out there of anybody. But if you look at their doctrine, that's what they believe. Right? If you're not a member of that church, you know. So, you know, we can go on and on about the separation thing, but that's what they were worried about because they were doing that again. All right? For they have taken their daughters for themselves, and so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands. Verse 3, and when I heard these things, I rent my garment and my mantle, and plucked off the hair of my head and of my beard, and sat down astonished. So here he is, and he's making an outward show that this is bothering him. He's concerned, because he's the one that had the burden, had to go to the king, pray, ask God to do something. God intervened on his behalf, allowed him to have favor with the king. So when they asked if they could go back, the king allowed them to go back, and he knows this is of God, and all of a sudden he is grieved because the people are doing this. And he's grieved because he's thinking, you know, here we went to God and we asked this of him, and he was gracious to allow us, and this is how the people are responding to what he's done for us. You know, they're now bringing in these people there, and when you do that, you're going to have issues. Because you're going to have there's not going to be unity. We talk about here, you know, we have a business, we call it the spirit of unity. The same thing in church. You know what we come together about? There should be a constitution of the church, and that constitution should be the core beliefs of what you believe. All right? And in them are some pretty basic things. But it's what we gather around and we say, this is what joins us together. This is what we believe. This is what we stand on. This is what holds us together. Well, when that begins to break down, you don't have unity. Right? Which is why, you know, you wouldn't have somebody come in that would preach opposite of what you would have in a constitution, because there's not going to be unity. Right? You know, now you can have loose fellowship on a smaller level. Like in Africa, it wouldn't matter what church they were from. I'm not going to let them stay on the side of the road. But, and I will tell you this, there are churches that I would go preach in, but I probably would not do it reciprocally. Okay, I wouldn't, you know, if I got invited to go preach at ABC Church, doesn't necessarily mean I'd let them come here. The way I figure about it, I'll take an open door wherever it is. But as far as doing that the other way, no. Why? Can't break that. Because that begins to water things down. Right? And then that's what happens with this influence. So you say, what's the big deal? They bring these people in. Can they not control that? No, you cannot control the world. I don't know anybody that's ever said, I'm going to go ahead and go through this. I've seen girls do it. I've seen guys try to do it. Well, I'm going to date them. I'm going to try to win them over. Well, they got a problem. I'm going to try to fix their problem. You cannot fix somebody's problem. You can't do it. Only God can do that. And if they don't let God do it, it's not going to change. It would be far better to let God work in their lives. And then if he does that, then you can let him into your lives. But you can't, if God doesn't do it, it's not going to, you can't, you know, you can have every intention to try and change that and say, well, I'll work on him and I'll change him. I'll get him to change his opinion. No, I mean, you know, so they bring them in, and then what happens? Out of the wisest man in the whole entire Bible, did Solomon win that battle? No. He lost it. The battle of influence. Well, maybe because he had too many. He didn't just do it once. He did it several times. He lost that battle of influence. By the way, that even goes with friends. Sometimes we let people close to our families that ought not to be under the same premise. Listen, there is one thing about evangelizing, but when it comes to your home, you protect that with everything you got. 100%. Some lessons over the years you learn the hard way. Looking back, I think about how many times that in the effort to help somebody, you end up putting people you care about at risk. Because you're thinking that you can change them. Or the extra 10, 20 miles you end up going, and the energy you spend on that, thinking, you know, what I've learned sometimes, in fact, there's a book written about that, is that, you know, as a pastor, that's not up to me either. That's up to God. Right? I can't do that. All I can do is show them the Word. You know, past that, and sometimes there are people that maybe you ought to cut loose, but you don't, and then it ends up causing problems, right? So that's what they were dealing with here. And it says here, and then Ezra was bothered by that, right? You know, even in pulpits today, the things that need to be said are not going to be the things that people like to hear. That's the problem. When it comes to these kinds of separation issues, they're not overly popular. Okay? But for sure, we need men like Ezra who are willing to bear their heart and say, this is something that I'm concerned about. This is where I see the church at. This is what I see happening. The world's coming in. Right? And it ought to concern us. It ought to be, you know, one thing too is like the younger generation's not as serious about it. You know, church is not, they're not going to, the next generation's not going to go drive an hour to church. And we're losing that really quick. Why are we losing that? Because of influence. We need to win the battle of influence every single day. The way you do it is you keep the world out, so that you can remain strong, so you can go out in the world. You can't compromise to where they're at. So verse 4, then were assembled unto me everyone that trembled. Let's go to verse 3, rather. And when I heard these things, I rent my garment. Verse 4, then were assembled unto me everyone that trembled at the words of God of Israel, because of the transgression of those that have been carried away. And I sat astonished until the evening service. So there were other people that were concerned about this, and they got together. Not everybody, but there was enough of them that were concerned about it that they got together with Ezra, and they sat down and they talked about it. You know, so, you know, we can still make a difference. We can still rescue the next generation. But we don't have any time to lose. And what it's going to take is a group of people to get together and says, this bothers me. The amount of things, like what are some things that you would say are non-starters for friendship? Like at what point will you say, okay, I can have a loose friendship here or a close friendship here? The things that that the young people get involved in, the things that we put a stamp of approval on, even if it's just an entertainment thing, all of those things is a weakening down. And we lose the influence battle. You know, I notice it in and of myself, you know. If I were to say something, a word that I did not use something that maybe I didn't say all the time, that maybe you wouldn't say was a bad word, but maybe not the best word. And then all of a sudden, you tolerate it once, you tolerate it twice, you tolerate it 3 times, and now it's in your vocabulary. And even though you really don't, you know that probably ought not to be in the vocabulary, it's in the vocabulary. And then the next thing you know, all of a sudden, you start hearing it in church. And then pretty soon you start hearing it in messages. And you're like, well, how did you get to that point? Right? You know, you think, well, it was something that if you said before, which would be really, you know, I'm trying not to say it in church, but because it's a very common word. Kids say it today. But instead of saying that stinks, there's another word you use, right? You know, when I was a kid, you didn't say that word. I mean, that was like, get your mouth slapped for sure if you said that word. Now, 3-year-olds will say it. You know, I mean, and just, you know, with a lot of meaning, like, man, this really, and then I just let it fly, and it's like, It's like, that, man, that's hard to hear because of what you grew up, and you're like, we didn't say that word. But then when you hear a preacher say it, instead of saying that stinks, he says that word, and you think, well, now we got it all the way to here. And just that fast. We have to ask ourselves, was that a good influence or a bad influence? How did that influence get in? And what does it do? All of a sudden what used to be black and white is gray and now accepted in many things, not just one thing, many things. And it does. When a young person sees somebody stand and has a testimony in them that does not bend and is true, it means something. They respect that. The moment we give that end, we lose ground with them. Then all of a sudden, they use that barometer to begin to decide what other things are right and wrong. Well, if that wasn't a big deal, then maybe this isn't a big deal. And if this isn't a big deal, maybe that's not a big deal. Maybe they loosened up on this. What are some other areas they loosen up? And then pretty soon, you lose the whole boat. And that was the very same thing that he was going on, and it grieved the people. You can even see things like, and I'm sure my kids are pretty much guilty of it too. I've seen them do it. You ought to be a pastor and watching your kids in church. Man, you talk about your temperature gauge. She goes, if you think it's hard on you, thank the Lord they're older. I don't have to do that so much more. But my worst nightmare is to turn around and see one of my kids running in church. Why? Because I'm the pastor. So not only am I going to kill them, but then I'm going to get it, right? And you stop and you go, hey, don't run in church, right? Now, where do you think I heard that? Because I grew up in church. And if I ever even dared to run in church, I honestly thought the ground was going to open up and suck me in. Wasn't something I even thought about doing. You even break out from a walk to a little jog, and all of a sudden the fear of God came over you, right? And you're like, oh, no way. Or, you don't dare. Mom, I'd be talking, she'd reach over and pinch me. Dig those nails right in my leg. You don't dare say ouch. Not even, you don't move. You're supposed to sit there and take it and not talk no more. And you're like, you even do that. How many of you ever been taken to a church bathroom before? I can promise you I have. The last thing you want to do on the way out is say, no, somebody help me. Because it gets really bad, right? Back then, everybody's applauding the mom, everybody, you go get them. And there was a lot of grace going on, and some of that stuff we end up losing. Why? For the same reason. Whenever you give in to something, you have to say, do we like the product that we have now? Do we like that? Are we satisfied where the church is? Are we satisfied with the importance that church ought to be in people's lives? Or have we lost some commitment to that? Okay? So they all got together and they were mourning that, verse 5. In the evening sacrifice, I arose up from my heaviness, and having rent my garment and my mantle, I fell upon my knees and spread out my hands unto the Lord my God. And I said, O my God, I am ashamed and blush to lift up my face to thee, my God. For our iniquities are increased over our head, and our trespass is grown up to the heavens. In a short amount of time. They came, they didn't have foreign wives. They get a little bit of blessing. They get a little goodness in their life, and they forget all about it. And then it didn't start out where everybody just starts. First maybe one guy brings in a wife. Nothing happens to him. Nobody says anything. She's pretty. She's a good helper. So the next one says, well, his arm didn't fall off. Well, I'm going to go get me one. And then this one says, well, I'm going to go get me one. And then pretty soon the whole community's doing that. And then he finds out about it, and they're like, guys, do you realize why we're here to begin with? Because we did that. And now we're spitting in God's face. And it made him blush. Do you think the church knows how to blush anymore? Mm-mm. Now, of course, we're we're independent Baptists, and they're certainly not perfect. But do you know how many denominations across the board have accepted same-sex marriage? Now, that's not ever happening. Here. And I'll probably be in the naughty corner. But it's not. It can't. But so many have. And you look back, and you were to go back in the 1920 and listen to some of the old Methodist preachers, I promise you, hellfire and brimstone. I mean, some good word. I mean, very little difference. Now, it's like, well, not all. I'm sure there are some that have stuff, but it's costing them. They're losing their buildings because the denomination owned the building. They're having to start over. They're taking a stand. They're losing their crowd. But then we've got our own issues. We don't blush anymore, right? It's not, our sin doesn't bother us that we've become lukewarm. And for Ezra, when he went to God, see, he feels kind of responsible because he's the one that went to God and asked for help. And when he gave it to him, he's over there defending Israel, and he's standing up for him, and he's saying, God, would you do this for us? And he asked God to give him favor with that king. He goes out on a limb, and then he comes back, and he's embarrassed. He's actually scared. Well, I think we need to be a little bit afraid. I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing to have some of the good press about Christianity that we've recently had. But we can't just let it in there. Man, I'd love there to see, even if it's just one last push. Wouldn't you love to go out in the rapture with a church on fire? Close to God, doing what we're supposed to do. Now, we can't control everything, but we can work on this, right? We know there's going to be a great falling away, but does it have to be us? I mean, that's something we can do, right? Is work so that this place, until Jesus comes, is a place that honors God. Holds the fort, where people can find truth in love. They can get help they need. And the way to do that is to get away from sin and the world as fast as you can, right? So he's praying and he's blushing about it. And it goes on to say here, since the days of our fathers have been in great trespass unto this day, and for our iniquities have we, our kings and our priests, been delivered into the hand of the kings of the lands, to the sword, to captivity, to spoil, and to confusion of face, as it is this day. He's saying, this is where we've gotten in trouble, and this is where we're at even right now. And now for a little space, grace hath been showed from the Lord our God, to leave us a remnant to escape, and to give us a nail in his holy place, that our God might lighten our eyes and give us a little reviving in our bondage. He says, man, we're thankful that God has given us a little reviving in our bondage. They are still in bondage. They are not free, but they've been given a little grace. And I tell you what, we've been given a little grace. We deserve the hand of punishment in America, and we haven't gotten it. That's a little grace. That's a call there's a call for all the Jews to come home. They've been doing that for quite some time. Do you know what it's called? It's a call for Christians to come home. It's a chance to really honor who he is. And thankful that there are many places in the world that suffer and we're not suffering. I'm not afraid. We have plenty to take care of our families. Our kids and grandkids, they're okay. That's a little grace. Man, we ought to get around that grace and hold on to it. God ought to know every day that we acknowledge where that's coming from. And every family in this church and the church around, ought to bend the knee and say, thank you. Thank you. And there ought to be a call to holiness for this purpose. out of gratitude of what he's doing for us. Man, we got hope. Real hope. Right? And in spite of the way it's around us, it just seems like there's an umbrella over us. And I'm thankful for that. You know, and he acknowledged it. He said, you know, since the days of our fathers, he said, this is what happened to us. And now for a little space, grace hath been bestowed from the Lord our God to leave us a remnant to escape and to give us a nail in his holy place. That nail is just something to hold on to, some hope, that our God might lighten our eyes and give us a little reviving in our bondage. For we were in bondage, yet our God hath not forsaken us in our bondage, but hath extended mercy. So extended mercy means he gave it, and then when it was going to run out, he gave it some more. Have you not ever experienced that? When you come to God and he lets you miss it by that much, and it doesn't fall apart. And when you deserve punishment, what does he do? He gives you a little bit more mercy. And when he does, you better grab that thing. You better hold on to it. And say, thank you. Thank you. Listen, I can tell you, you might see some depressing things around, but you don't hear everybody's story. I can just tell you, in the 33 years of doing this, I have seen success stories. I've seen marriages that nobody knows about, that should have fallen apart, but they didn't. I mean, you weren't there in my office when they sat down, and you're looking at them and you're thinking, "Ooh, man, this is so sad." And then they did the hard work, and today they're still married. Kids like, you know, I didn't even remember it, to be honest with you. Remember the guy that's going out to Iowa and starting that church in Iowa? Well, he put a little thing on Facebook, and it popped up on mine, and I forgot. And he was mentioning how when he came to our church, he was a long-haired, rebellious teenager. And I thought, yeah, I forgot about that. It was really a pain in the neck for a while, right? You know, I mean, I actually remember going to Washington, D.C., and back then those skater pants were really big, where they come down in they're down around your waist, right? And he was walking on this much of his pants, and he'd walk into the bathroom, a public bathroom, a men's bathroom. Have you ever, the guys have been in, when there's liquid all over the floor, right? I lose my mind if my shoelace touches it, right? I want to cut it off and start over. Well, he's walking in with his pant legs soaking up all this stuff on the floor. I'm going, that is the most. Then he's sharing a room with me. Not my bed, though. I'm like, Didn't even change his clothes. Man, and I thought, there ain't no hope for this guy. Right? And look where he is today. Because it does work. But when the system falls apart, that no longer has the teeth of conviction in it, it can't help anybody. See, he needed to be called out of that and into something else. Right? It's still, because he still extends that mercy and that grace. But we've got to be separated for them to be something to come to. So what you want them to do, you want the people in Scott County that have problems in their life, you want them to bring their problems here. Now, what good are we to them? Well, there's a room full of people that have seen God fix their problems. So then we rally around that group of people, and we love on them, and we support them, and we help them because we remember God helped us. Well, how did God help us? With the Word. Being told, hey, maybe this isn't something God wants you to do. If you get it out of your life, God will help you grow to the next level. The next level helps you. And then you see this move on, and that's what he was saying. He was saying, man, we've been showed a little bit of grace. And then it goes on to say, look at verse 9. For we were bondmen, yet our God hath not forsaken us in our bondage. Are you glad for that in your life? Okay. For we were bondmen, yet God hath not forsaken us in our bondage, but hath exalted mercy unto us, in the sight of the kings of Persia, to give us a reviving, to set up a house of our God, and to repair the desolation thereof, and to give us a wall in Judah and in Jerusalem. And now, O our God, what shall we say after this? For we have forsaken thy commandments, which thou hast commanded by the servants, the prophets, saying, the land unto which you go to possess, it is unclean land with filthiness of the people. If there was filthiness of the people then, do you not think there's filthiness of the people now? Right? Look, things are changing all around. In the next 20 years, there's going to be some hard decisions parents are going to have to make that we don't have to make right now, but you're going to. The more the world takes over, the more we got to question their influence in everything. And the indoctrination that's happening. From the internet, I think I was talking to Kevin, and we were talking about how that lately we've been getting lots of questions from the younger generation about loyalty. And I mentioned this to him, and he said, Dave, I'm seeing the same thing. And you mentioned another pastor in North Carolina. He says, I'm seeing the same thing of the younger generation. And Kevin said this, I didn't think about that. He said, do you know why we're losing that battle? He said, because we only get them for 3 hours a week if we're lucky. TikTok has them 3 and 4 hours a day. And we're losing the battle. We can't out-influence them. Because they can hear it over and over and over again. And you know what happens when you're on those feeds? What happens if you look at one? It's not going to give you an opposing argument because you look at it. What's it going to do? It's going to feed you something along that very same line. And then it's very convincing. And here comes another one. And here comes another one. And here comes another one. I mean, and I told you, you guys laugh about me about that flat earth thing. The other thing that's gaining speed like crazy is that. And I'm like, how? Same way. It's that never stopping. Just constant information over and over and over and over and over again. They were being out-influenced. Well, then it comes time where we need to, there are some people you don't want your children spending 8 hours with. There are some ideas that I don't want my children. I know one time, boy, I was upset about this. I sent my kid, my oldest son, got to that point one day, I said, well, here's the choices. You either get an apartment or you're going to Papua New Guinea for 3 months. And he chose Papua New Guinea. So I sent him over there. It's sort of going to be a reboot for him, right? That missionary did not believe in having Christmas. Okay? Did not believe in having a Christmas tree. Thought it was wrong, whatever, right? Well, I don't really care. If you want to do that, that's up to you, right? But what did bother me is for 3 months, the only thing he thought important was to get my kid to give up Christmas. And I'm going, first off, if that bothers you that much, should you take money from a church who believes Christmas is okay? Probably not, right? But they won't do that. And I'm like, seriously? You're going to influence that? Out of the other very, very important things in the world that somebody can learn from somebody. No. I don't want, that's not, no. Right? That's ridiculous. Well, as you look at this world today, you're thinking, do I really want my kid to have 8 hours with that? Unfiltered, whatever they think. And now it's spilling over into them. Well, it may cause us to have to rethink how we do some things as that influence gets louder. And then we have to protect this. Have to protect this. Or we'll lose the battle. And and that's the reason why. But then what happens when you get home and the average person who's got kids, by the time you run all around and do everything, how much time do you actually have with your children by yourself during the week? Before you got to get them in bed and start it all over again? Not as much as they had out there. Right? Not as much. They got it from the kids in the bathroom to the kids at lunch to teachers to whatever. And you're up against it. Well, so it says here, The reason why I mention that is this, because of the people of the lands with their abominations, which have filled it from one end to the other, from one end of the land to the other, with their uncleanliness. Now therefore give not your daughters unto their sons. They're saying, don't give your daughters to those people. We should not be giving our children over to the world. Right? And listen, I know college is something that people, but listen, we cannot send weak kids to college. Man, I went to Bible college, and there were some things I needed to stay away from. In fact, probably it was me for the first year, right? You wouldn't want your kids hanging out with me. But then I got straightened out, right? Okay, all right. Now therefore give not your daughters unto their sons, neither take their daughters unto your sons, nor seek their peace or their wealth forever, that ye may be strong. Why don't you do that? So that you may be strong and eat the good of the land and leave it for inheritance to your children forever. And after all that has come upon us for our evil deeds and our great trespasses, seeing that thou art our God, hast punished us less than our iniquities deserved. He's acknowledging that God has punished them less than what they deserve. You know, from what I know about American God, I wonder why that shoe hadn't fallen a long time ago. But maybe he's just giving us less than we deserve. Probably ought to respect that, right? And has given us such deliverance as this. Should we again break thy commandments and join in affinity with the people of these abominations? Wouldest not thou be angry with us till thou hast consumed us, so there should be no remnant nor escaping? I mean, he's just being honest. Wouldest thou not be angry with us till thou hast consumed us, so there should be no remnant nor escaping? O Lord God of Israel, thou art righteous, for we remain yet escaped as it is this day. Behold, we are before thee in our trespasses, for we cannot stand before thee because of this. Now, I got 5 minutes. Now when Ezra had prayed, and when he had confessed, weeping, and casting himself down before the house of the Lord God, there assembled unto him out of Israel a very great congregation of men and women and children, for the people wept very sore. And Shekinah the son of Jehiel, one of the sons of Elam, answered and said unto Ezra, we have trespassed against God. Man, verse 10, I don't have time to look at that. This is what America needs, and what I read to you in chapter 10, verse 1. And have taken, we have, in verse 2, we have trespassed against our God and have taken strange wives of the people of the land. Yet now there is hope in Israel concerning this thing. Now therefore let us make a covenant with our God, look at this, to put away all the wives and such as are born of them according to the counsel of my Lord, and those that tremble at the commandment of our God, and let it be done according to the law. Arise, for this matter belongeth unto thee. We also will be with thee. Be of good courage and do it. Then arose Ezra and made the chief priests, the Levites, and all Israel to swear that they should do according to this word. And Ezra sware. Then Ezra rose up from before the house of God and went into the chamber of Jonan, the son of Elijah. And when he came thither, he did not eat bread nor drink water, for he mourned because of the transgression of them that had been carried away. And they made a proclamation throughout Judah and Jerusalem unto all the children of captivity, that they should gather themselves unto Jerusalem. And whosoever could not come within 3 days, according to the counsel of the priests and the elders, all his substance should be forfeited, and themselves separated from the congregation of those that have been carried away. And I don't have time to go through that. I mean, they're serious. They're like, hey, you need to get to Jerusalem in 3 days. If you don't do it, you forfeit everything you have. And what they did, they actually said, here's what we're going to do. Everybody that's married a strange woman and that had children with her, we're going to send them away. First off, can you imagine what a mess that was? Heartbreaking, really. Right? I mean, this has been going on long enough that they have kids. It wasn't just started, it had been going on. But then when we read that, when you read the Old Testament, if you don't if you cannot look into current day through that, then what good is it? And this story is just a story. It means nothing. Except see where you can make it fit in today. And that's what we need to do. Where does this fit in today? Well, I can't rehash the whole thing. But man, we cannot be giving our kids to that out there. You can't do it. Too many cut corners. Now, I can tell you this. I've seen my own kids miss a bullet that should have gone bad. And I tell them, hey, it's by the grace of God that actually worked out because it shouldn't have. I mean, you were playing with fire. And the only reason why you didn't get burnt is because God was kind. That's it. But if you think for 1 second that that was the right path, no. That wasn't the right path. Thank the Lord that good can come out of it. Thank the Lord that even if there's not unity, there can be unity. If both people turn at the same time and get on track. And it can go the right way. But that's not what we want. We want to start out right. You know, we want them to be able to, when you no longer tell them to go to church, that there is something driving themselves to go. In here. And when they look at who they're going to marry, they're going to value what God thinks more than what anybody else thinks. They're not going to compromise. Do you know, probably one of the hardest things, and you see it over and over again, a guy or a girl will start dating somebody that's not where they need to be. And the pain they go through. And oftentimes people, our young people need to learn this. Like, for instance, I just saw somebody post about Dave Ramsey that when you're 20 years old, if you invested $20 or $200 a month or whatever, you'd have at this age $2 million. I didn't do that. Right? And I'm not 20, that ship sailed. But now I will tell you, that's good advice. That's good advice, money-wise. But I will tell you this too. You know what else is good advice? Trust God in what you know is right, and don't compromise. If you invest that wisely, it will also have the same return on investment. If you're patient, you let it grow, and you believe that God knows what's best for you, and that you can trust Him. And if you can just wait, and don't give in to this world, and when they're going that way 100 miles an hour, we get our little band together and we're going to go this way. And sure, it will seem lonely for a little while. But God will be faithful. And He has never lost anything that He's invested in. He's not a loser. We're the ones that do that. He doesn't do that. He will be faithful. And it is the right way, although it may seem a little lonely. That is why we need a church family, so that our kids, and we're not walking by ourselves. At least I know when I come here, there are like-minded people that are trying to accomplish the same thing. And together, we're going to serve the Lord. And we're going to honor God and stay away from there. We have to go out there and be a witness to them. We can't do it if we're like them. We can't do it. Now, when they get saved, then that's when, God can help them. But if the messenger, us, are so watered down and so weak that there's very little light left, we're going to not make a very big difference out there. We're just not going to do it. But man, when we stick to what we know, not ugly, not mean, man, I tell you what, I wouldn't hurt anybody. Are you kidding me? I've had to bend my knee in front of a holy God way, and I appreciate grace. I appreciate forgiveness. You will, there will always be a hand of grace here. I've had to grab a hold of it way to no judgment. I don't matter, honestly, it would not matter what story you told me. I promise you from my heart, I would tell you, as messed up as that, and whatever it is, God can help. And I believe that. Like in my core, I believe that. Because I've seen him do it. Which means we can open those doors up. But if we lose sight of that, we can't help anybody. And that was just a reminder of a chapter in the Bible, and you can do that. I mean, it's over and over and over again. There's so much. You can't even begin to scratch the surface of what's in there, of what you can learn from it. But just that little story has so much. I mean, I literally could have broke that down to sermons and preached 10 sermons on that. I mean, you can go back and just break that down. There's just so much meat in that one little chapter, right? That definitely applies to the things of today. We'll just let it. Brock, would you close us in prayer?